Hey, so I'm going to talk about how we took a centralized CI process in our organization and broke it down into mostly independent pipelines. So why is this important? So we scaled our business up and we had a centralized model and it got difficult to test everything, right? So I'm Sean, I work at Workday. We basically maintain tools for configuration management at Workday. And yeah, this is difficult. So what is a monolith, right? So we all have monolithic software in our organizations, right? So a monolith is a big chunk of code that we group together, and there's a lot of dependencies. It's difficult to test. So, we want to break it down and we want to make it simpler. So today I'm going to explain CI as the way that we get to the airport, right? And I'm going to use flying to your destination as deploying your code to production, okay? So simple concept, right? So if we take centralized CI, right, we've got a bus. The bus goes, it collects everybody, okay? And, some people miss the bus. The bus breaks down. Now everybody's late to the airport, right? So now that everybody's at the airport, we take all their code and we fly it to production, right? So somebody comes along and they say, hey, I need my code to go to production, so we delay the whole flight. And we suddenly now have people angry because their code's not going, and we can't explain why. It's this other team, talk to them. Right, so then we have an on-call engineer, and his job is to look at the dashboards and be like, oh, your code, it's gone to production, answer, triage issues, figure out all of these things for these teams. And it just doesn't really scale that well, right? So in a decentralized model, you can say, hey, you want to go to the airport, you can walk, you're not dependent on anybody, that's fine. Cycle if you want to go a bit faster. Take a car, pick up what you need on the way, get to the airport, or, hey, take the bus, we don't care. So this means that we can have as many flights as we want to production, right? We put what you want on your plane to production, and we ship it there. And then, you're more responsible for what's on your flight. So this changes the on-call duties, right? We shift the on-call to the team that's responsible. They can decide, they're best equipped to figure out what's on their flight. They know how to triage their own issues. Like, why would we as a team need to do that? So this kind of enables a proper CD model, right? So now you can deploy when you want. And, one good example is, you don't want to ship your monitoring infrastructure with your application because you need it the most at that instance, right? So we're enabling that. So one of the things we do is we give test developers freedom. So they can build their own pipelines. We don't really mind what tools or what kind of tests. We put the responsibility into the developers' hands, and they can make that decision themselves. But one thing to note is that we only support one model, so we as a team can't build and maintain all of these pipelines for all of these teams. So we just say, hey, you can do it, but we support one model, and that model is the one that we say is the right way. So one of the prerequisites is that you need to use trunk-based development, right? So you make a feature, you work on that feature for a short time, you merge it back into master, everything on master should be good to go and should be ready to be deployed, right? So the biggest question we always get then, now that we've got all these flights going to production, where's my code? Has my code went? Things I'm depending on, where are my libraries? Other teams using my code, they've already pushed it, so we had to build a simple metadata service. So we went for GraphQL on a graph database, because most of its relationships, not as much required with an SQL database. So now you can query this DB, it's linked into the CI/CD jobs automatically, and you can find out where your code is. So we've actually enabled this, right? So people can test, release, deploy as often as they want, in whatever way they want, so it's a little bit easier, right, to get to this actual CD model. So the biggest problem we had was fear. So people thought that getting rid of the big global integration job that tests everything together would cause failures. But so far from a lot of the teams, we've seen they're taking more responsibility for what they're actually deploying. And the biggest thing we've seen is happy developers. So I'm a new team, I come on board, I have a way that I want to do things, I want to deploy, I don't want to be dependent on anything, and we've enabled that. And that's pretty much me.